My name is Margaret Hale, and today I will open the deepest wound of my life, a wound carved not by strangers, but by the very hands of my own family. People say daughters-in-law are like daughters, but mine turned my home into a battlefield. I raised my son with love, gave him everything I could, hoping that when he married, his wife would treat me with kindness. But instead, I became a prisoner in my own house, an unwanted shadow, a burden to the ones I once called family. It all came crashing down one evening. I had cooked a simple meal. Though my hands trembled with age and my eyes blurred with time, my daughter-in-law, Emily, took one bite, her face twisting with anger. "No salt," she snapped. And before I could even apologize, her hand struck me across the face. The sting of that slap was nothing compared to the humiliation. I was no longer her mother-in-law. I was her servant, her target. My own son stood silent, watching, as if my pain meant nothing. But what happened after that night? What I decided to do shocked everyone, and it changed the course of my life forever. My name is Margaret Hale, and if you have heard the hook of my story, then you already know the shame I carry. But to truly understand how one slap could break the soul of a woman who had endured so much, you must go back with me back to the years before that dreadful night. I was born in a small town in Ohio, in a time when respect for elders was sacred, and a mother's word was law inside her home. Life was not easy, but we survived. My husband, Thomas Hale, was a factory worker, and together we raised our only son, David. From the moment he was born, I poured all my love, sweat, and sacrifices into him. I skipped meals so he could eat more. I stitched his clothes when other children had store-bought ones. When Thomas died young from a heart attack, I stood firm. I became mother and father to David, determined that he would never feel the sting of poverty as I had. For years, it was just the two of us. David grew into a fine young man, or at least I believed so. He was polite, quiet, and ambitious. I worked small jobs, cleaning houses and sewing clothes, to put him through college. Every time I saw him in a fresh shirt that I had mended with my weary hands, pride filled my heart. I told myself, this boy will be my comfort in old age. But life has a cruel way of laughing at our hopes. When David married Emily, I thought I was gaining a daughter. She was beautiful, well-spoken, and charming in those first few meetings. She smiled sweetly, held my hands, and called me Mom. My lonely heart, desperate for love, believed her. I prayed she would love me as her own daughter at first. Things were calm. Emily cooked meals, decorated the house, and filled the rooms with laughter. I kept myself busy, staying out of their way, giving them space. But soon, small things began to change. I noticed the way Emily rolled her eyes when I spoke. I saw how David grew distant, spending more time with her and less time with me. I told myself it was natural. After all, every man shifts his focus when he marries. But then came the whispers. Late at night, I would hear them in the living room. Emily's voice, sharp like a knife. She doesn't contribute anything. Why is she even here? And David's reply, hushed but weak, she's my mother, Emily. What do you expect me to do? Then treat her like a guest, not like a queen. Those words sliced through me like glass. A queen? If only they knew how many nights I went hungry so David could eat. How many winters I froze so he could have a blanket. I was no queen. I was a mother. Still, I swallowed my pain. I told myself they were young, that they would understand my sacrifices one day. But the insults grew bolder, and Emily's true nature revealed itself. She criticized everything I did, the way I cooked, the way I cleaned, even the way I walked. "You're so slow," she would hiss. "So useless." David, he stayed silent. My own son, the boy I raised with my blood and tears, turned his face away. And then came the night of the soup. It was winter, and my joints ached with arthritis. But I wanted to do something kind, to cook dinner for the family. I chopped the vegetables slowly, carefully, and boiled them into a simple broth. My hands trembled as I stirred the pot, my back screaming in pain. Finally, I placed the bowls on the table, smiling softly at the thought that they might appreciate my effort. But when Emily took her first spoonful, her face hardened. She slammed the spoon down, glaring at me with eyes full of venom. "There's no salt," she snapped. I opened my mouth to apologize, but before the words could escape, she stood up. Her hand lashed out, striking me across the cheek. The sound echoed in the room louder than thunder. My body shook, but it wasn't from the pain of the slap. It was from the shock that my daughter-in-law had raised her hand against me. For a moment, the world stopped. My ears rang, my vision blurred, and I waited for my son to defend me, to stand by me, to at least say something. But David just sat there, frozen, his lips sealed, his eyes fixed on his bowl of soup as if it held the answers to his cowardice. "Next time," Emily hissed, "cook it properly, or don't bother at all." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout that I was not her servant, that I had built the very roof over her head with the sweat of my life. But the words died in my throat. I felt small. I felt invisible. That night, I locked myself in my room, holding my bruised cheek with trembling fingers. The tears wouldn't stop. How had it come to this? I had survived poverty, widowhood, and loneliness, but never had I imagined that my greatest enemy would be the woman who married my son. I thought of leaving, but where would I go? The house was mine, yes, but my heart was still tied to David. How could I abandon him, even after his silence? Still, something inside me cracked that night. A mother's love can endure almost anything, but when your own child watches your humiliation in silence, that is the deepest betrayal of all. I didn't sleep until dawn. My pillow was soaked with tears, my chest heavy with grief. And in that darkness, a seed of resolve began to form. Emily thought I was weak. She thought I would bow, stay silent, and accept her cruelty. But she was wrong. I was old, yes. My bones were frail, my body tired. But my spirit still burned. That slap was not the end of my story. It was only the beginning. The morning after that dreadful night, I woke up with a heavy head and a bruised cheek. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the red mark that Emily's hand had left on my face. It wasn't just a bruise, it was a reminder that my worth in my own home had been reduced to nothing. My name is Margaret Hale, and though the world may see me as just an old woman, inside me live memories of a mother who once carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. As I touched my cheek, my reflection whispered a cruel truth. My sacrifices had been forgotten. When I walked into the kitchen, Emily was already there, dressed elegantly, sipping coffee. She didn't look at me. She didn't apologize. She acted as though nothing had happened. That hurt more than the slap itself. David came down moments later, his eyes briefly meeting mine before quickly turning away. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't even acknowledge the swelling on my face. Instead, he muttered, "I'm late for work," and left without another word. My heart broke again that morning. I had raised him to be kind, to stand up for what was right. But somewhere along the way, I had lost him. The days that followed were worse. Emily began to grow bolder. She would criticize the way I cleaned the house. "Can't you move any faster?" she would say. She would insult my cooking. "No wonder David is always tired, you never made him strong." Sometimes, she wouldn't even bother hiding her contempt. "You're just old baggage." Each word was a knife, slicing deeper into the wounds already festering inside me. But the worst part wasn't Emily. It was David's silence. My son, my only son, became a stranger. He was there physically, but emotionally, he was gone. He never defended me. He never asked about my pain. He never reminded his wife that I was his mother. That betrayal cut deeper than any slap. One evening, I tried to speak with him. "David," I whispered as he sat on the couch scrolling through his phone. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" He sighed loudly, not even looking up. "What is it, Mom?" My voice trembled. Do you think I'm a burden here?" Finally, he looked at me. His face was tired, annoyed, almost cold. "Mom," Emily, and I just want peace in this house. Sometimes you make things difficult. Maybe you don't mean to, but it happens. Those words shattered me, a burden. That's what I was to him now. Not a mother, not the woman who gave him life, just a problem to be tolerated. I couldn't respond. My throat closed and tears welled up in my eyes. I turned away before he could see them, though I doubt he would have cared. That night, lying in my bed, I thought about Thomas, my late husband. If he had been alive, would things have been different? Would Emily have dared to raise her hand against me? Would David have had the courage to defend me? But Thomas was gone, and all I had left was this silent suffering. Still, I wasn't ready to give up. Something inside me whispered that this was a test not from Emily, not from David, but from life itself. A test of whether I would crumble or rise. A week later, another storm came. I had made dinner again carefully this time. I double-checked the salt, the spices, everything. But Emily found another reason to complain. This chicken is dry. She sneered, pushing her plate away. Do you even know how to cook properly? My hands trembled as I clutched the edge of the table. I did my best, Emily. Your best isn't good enough, she spat. Not for me. Not for David. You're just useless. Something inside me snapped. For the first time, I looked her in the eye and said, enough. The room went silent. David froze. Emily's face twisted with fury. What did you just say to me? She hissed. I said enough. I repeated, my voice stronger this time. I may be old. I may be weak. But I am not your servant. I am not. Useless. And this is my house. I built this home with my husband. I raised David here. You walk these halls because of me? Emily laughed cruelly. Your house, please. Everything here belongs to David now. Her words stung, but I stood firm. For the first time, I refused to cower. David shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Nothing. His silence was louder than any scream. That night, I didn't sleep. But it wasn't grief that kept me awake. It was resolve. I realized something important. Emily had power over me only because I stayed silent. She mistook my patience for weakness. But I had lived through storms far worse than her cruelty. Poverty, loss, loneliness. I had survived them all. Why was I letting her break me? I remembered the nights I worked until my fingers bled just to pay David's tuition. I remembered the winters I wore torn shoes so he could have a proper coat. I remembered the nights I cried quietly so he wouldn't see my pain. I was not weak. I was a mother, and mothers are made of steel, even when the world forgets it. The next morning, I woke up with a fire in my chest. For the first time in months, I didn't feel afraid. I felt alive. Emily noticed it too. As I walked past her in the kitchen, she muttered, "Don't get in my way today." I looked at her calmly and replied, "I won't. But don't get in mine either." Her eyes widened in shock. She wasn't used to me answering back. For a brief moment, she seemed uncertain, even shaken. And in that moment, I knew something had shifted. This was not the end of my suffering. No, but it was the beginning of my fight back. My name is Margaret Hale, and by now, you know the bruises that cover more than just my skin. They live deep inside me, where no one can see. But what happened in the weeks after Emily first struck me? That was when I learned how cruel silence can be. Days passed in a blur. I kept myself busy with small chores, watering the plants, folding laundry, knitting scarves I wasn't sure anyone would wear. I tried to disappear into the background, hoping that maybe, just maybe, peace would return to the house. But peace never came. Emily's insults became sharper, her temper shorter. "Why are you still here?" she snapped one morning as I made tea. "I live here," I replied softly. "Well, maybe it's time you didn't." Her words stung, but David's silence stung more. He sat there, sipping his coffee, pretending not to hear. I wanted to shout, to remind him of the years I had carried him, but the words turned bitter on my tongue. Instead, I swallowed them, letting the silence choke me. One evening, it all came crashing down. Emily had invited some of her friends over. The table was filled with food roast chicken, mashed potatoes, salad, bread. I had helped prepare it, though Emily made sure to take all the credit. As her friends laughed and chatted, Emily began to mock me. She's sweet, but she forgets things, Emily said, pointing at me with a cruel smile. Yesterday, she nearly burned the soup again. Honestly, sometimes I feel like I have 2 children instead of 1 husband. Her friends laughed at me. I felt the blood rush to my cheeks. My hands trembled as I clutched my napkin, my heart pounding so loudly I thought they could hear it. I wanted to vanish. I wanted the earth to open and swallow me whole. David said nothing, not one word. That night, after the guests left, I went to my room and wept, my pillow soaked with tears, my chest heavy with shame. I had become a joke in my own home. The next morning, I woke with swollen eyes and a burning heart. I decided to speak to David again. David, I whispered as he adjusted his tie. Do you remember when you were a boy? How I used to stay up all night when you were sick? How I skipped meals so you could eat? Do you remember any of that? He looked at me for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he sighed. Mom, please don't start this. You're making things harder than they need to be. Harder. That word echoed in my mind like a curse. Was my very existence harder? I watched him walk out the door, leaving me with silence as my only companion. That was when something inside me broke. That evening, as Emily criticized the way I folded the laundry, I snapped. Enough, I shouted, louder than I had ever dared. Before she froze, shocked. David looked up from his phone, startled. I am not your slave. I screamed, my voice shaking but strong. I have spent my whole life giving, sacrificing, bleeding for this family. And you both of you treat me like I am nothing. But I am not nothing. I am your mother, David. And you, Emily, you may be his wife, but you will never erase me. For a moment, the room was silent. My chest heaved, my heart raced. I felt powerful, even if just for a second. Then Emily's face twisted with rage. How dare you speak to me like that? She hissed. Before I could move, she shoved me hard. My frail body stumbled back, hitting the corner of the table. Pain shot through my ribs, but worse than the pain was the sound David's silence. He didn't shout. He didn't defend me. He just sat there, his lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes avoiding mine. My body ached, but my heart shattered. That night, as I lay in bed, clutching my side where the bruise throbbed, I made a decision. I could no longer wait for David to save me. He wouldn't. He had chosen his silence, and silence is the same as betrayal. If I was to survive this, I would have to save myself. The next morning, I put on my old coat and walked to the park down the street. The cold air stung my face, but I didn't mind. I needed to think, to breathe away from the poison of that house. As I sat on the bench, I noticed an elderly woman feeding the pigeons. Her face was gentle, her hands steady. She looked at me and smiled. You look troubled, dear, she said softly. I don't know why, but in that moment, I broke down. Tears spilled from my eyes, and I told her everything. About Emily, about David, about the slap, about the silence. She listened quietly, her eyes full of compassion. When I finished, she placed her hand over mine. You are stronger than you. No, she whispered. Don't let them break you. Sometimes, family is not the blood we raise, but the people who see our worth when others don't. Her words stayed with me. They wrapped around my heart like a blanket, giving me strength I didn't know I had. When I returned home, Emily was waiting. Her eyes narrowed, her arms crossed. Where were you? She demanded. I met her gaze without fear. Out, she scoffed. Next time, tell me. You can't just... I cut her off. I don't need your permission. Her jaw dropped, her eyes wide with shock. David looked up, confused. But I didn't give either of them a chance to respond. I walked past them, straight to my room, and closed the door. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the old woman's words. Sometimes, family is not the blood we raise. Maybe she was right. Maybe my real strength would come not from clinging to David, but from finding my own path. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to dream of a life beyond that house. A life where I was not a burden. A life where I was not invisible. A life where I was free. My name is Margaret Hale, and if you've followed my story thus far, then you know the bruises on my body are nothing compared to the wounds inside my heart. But something had changed in me since that day at the park, since those words from the kind stranger reminded me that I was still worth something. The atmosphere in the house shifted after I started standing up for myself. Emily didn't expect resistance from me. She was used to my silence, my bowed head, my trembling hands. But now, when she barked orders, I didn't always obey. When she mocked me, I didn't always swallow my pride. One evening, as she criticized the way I folded the laundry again, I calmly replied, "If you don't like it, you can fold it yourself." The shock on her face was almost satisfying. "You're getting bold," she sneered. "No," I said softly. "I'm just remembering who I am." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't reply. For the first time, I had silenced her. But David, he confused me more than ever. One night, after Emily stormed off in anger, he lingered in the living room. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, he would finally speak to me. He looked at me, his lips parting as if to say something, but then he shook his head and muttered, "Just try not to upset her, Mom," before walking away. Try not to upset her. Those words were like a knife. My own son, asking me to keep the peace when it was his wife who tore it apart every day. I realized then that David was not my little boy anymore. He was a man who had chosen his wife's comfort over his mother's dignity. And maybe he always would. The breaking point came on a rainy Saturday evening. I was knitting quietly in my room when I heard shouting downstairs. Emily's voice carried through the walls. "She's in the way, David. I can't live like this anymore." I froze, my heart pounding. "She's my mother," David said weakly. "Then do something about it." Emily snapped. "Either she goes, or I do." The words hit me like a hammer. My hands shook, the yarn falling to the floor. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My own daughter-in-law wanted me gone, and my son was being forced to choose. I pressed my ear to the door, desperate for his answer. There was silence. A long, heavy silence. And then David whispered, I'll talk to her." My knees buckled. I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face. My son was going to ask me to leave. Later that night, he knocked gently on my door. "Mom." His voice was soft, almost ashamed. I wiped my tears quickly, trying to steady myself. "Come in, David." He stepped inside, avoiding my eyes. "Mom, you know I love you." "But Emily, she's not happy. And when she's not happy, it makes things difficult for me too." "Difficult?" I whispered bitterly. He sighed. "Maybe it would be better if you stayed somewhere else for a while, just until things calm down." Somewhere else, my son wanted to send me away like unwanted furniture. I looked at him, really looked at him. The boy I had raised, the man I had sacrificed everything for, he was gone. All that remained was someone I didn't recognize. "David," I said softly, my voice trembling. "Do you remember when you broke your leg at 13? How I slept on the floor next to your bed for weeks, just to make sure you weren't in pain? Do you remember how I worked double shifts so you could have a proper college education? Do you remember any of it?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. His eyes darted away, full of shame. I stood, my back straight despite the pain in my bones. "I will not leave my own house, David. This is the home your father and I built. If anyone should go, it will not be me." He looked stunned, almost as if he didn't expect me to fight back. But before he could reply, Emily appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed, Her face twisted with triumph. "Don't worry, David," she said coldly. "She'll come around. Old people always do." And she walked away. That night, I didn't cry. For the first time in months, I felt something stronger than grief, determination. If Emily thought she could erase me, she was wrong. I had survived. Too much to let her win. The next morning, I made a plan. I started small. I went to the community center down the street and signed up for a knitting club. Being around other women my age reminded me I wasn't alone. We shared stories, laughed together, even cried together. For the first time in a long time, I felt like a human being again. Then, I reached out to an old friend, Clara, a woman I hadn't spoken to in years. She welcomed me with open arms, and when I told her my struggles, she squeezed my hands and said, "Margaret, you've given enough of your life away. It's time you take some of it back." Her words lit a fire inside me. One evening, I returned home later than usual. Emily was furious. "Where were you?" she demanded. "At my knitting club." I replied calmly. Her eyes widened. "Knitting club? You didn't even ask me. I don't need your permission," I said firmly. For once, she had no response. She stormed off, slamming the door behind her. David, sitting silently on the couch, glanced at me. For a fleeting moment, I saw something in his eyes, guilt, maybe even regret. But he said nothing, and I realized then that I no longer needed his words. Weeks passed, and I grew stronger. The bruises on my body faded, but the fire in my heart only grew. I started walking in the mornings, meeting neighbors, living again. Emily hated it. She couldn't stand that I was no longer broken, no longer silent. One night, during another argument, she shouted, "Why don't you just leave already? No one wants you here." I stood tall, looking her directly in the eye. "This house is mine. My husband and I built it. If you want me gone, you'll have to drag me out yourself." Her face twisted with rage, but this time, she didn't touch me. And in that silence, I realized something powerful. Emily's strength came only from my weakness. Now that I had found my voice, she had nothing left to use against me. That night, as I lay in bed, I whispered to myself, "They tried to break me, but I am still here." And deep down, I knew the final storm was yet to come. But this time, I was ready. My name is Margaret Hale, and this is the final chapter of my story. By now, you know the bruises, the betrayal, the silence. You know how my daughter-in-law, Emily, tried to crush me. You know how my own son, David, stood by in silence as I suffered. But what happened in the end, even I could never have imagined. It was a Sunday morning when the storm finally broke. I had been preparing breakfast, humming softly to myself, when Emily burst into the kitchen, her face red with fury. "You embarrassed me in front of my friends again last night," she snapped. "Do you know how ridiculous you looked? Telling your silly stories." I turned slowly, meeting her gaze. Without fear, they weren't silly stories. They were memories of my life, memories that matter, even if they don't matter to you. Her jaw tightened. "You think you're so important, don't you? But you're nothing here. Nothing." David entered the room just then, already tense. "Emily, please," but she cut him off. "No, David. This is it. I can't live like this anymore. Either she leaves, or I do." The words hung in the air like poison. My heart pounded. But this time, I didn't cry. This time, I didn't beg. I stood tall and said calmly, "Then maybe you should leave, Emily." The room fell silent. Emily's face twisted with rage. "How dare you?" she shouted, raising her hand as if to strike me again. But before she could, David stepped between us. For the first time, my son protected me. "Enough," David roared, his voice shaking the walls. "Emily, stop." Emily froze, stunned. David turned to me, his eyes brimming with guilt. "Mom, I'm sorry. I should have stopped this long ago. I should have defended you. I should have been your son." Tears filled my eyes, but I held them back. I had waited so long for those words, but they came too late. Emily's voice cracked with anger. So you're choosing her over me? David's face hardened. I'm choosing what's right. Emily let out a bitter laugh. Fine, if that's how it is, then I'm leaving. She grabbed her bag, her heels clicking furiously against the floor, and stormed out of the house. The door slammed and silence fell. For a long moment, David and I stood there, the weight of years between us. Then he whispered, "Mom, can you ever forgive me?" I looked at him, my only son, the boy I had raised with my blood and tears. Part of me wanted to fall into his arms to tell him everything was okay. But another part of me, the part that had endured his silence, his betrayal, knew forgiveness could not come so easily. "I will always love you, David," I said softly. "But love and forgiveness are not the same thing. You watched me suffer. You let her hurt me. And I don't know if I can ever forget that." His eyes filled with tears. He sank to his knees, clutching my hands. "Please, Mom, give me a chance to make it right." I placed my trembling hand on his head. "You'll have to earn it, David. With time. With action, not words." In the weeks that followed, Emily never returned. David tried to fill the silence she left behind with kindness, with apologies, with small acts of love. He cooked meals for me, helped me with chores, even walked with me to the park. He tried to be the son I had raised, but the scars on my heart remained. One afternoon, as we sat together in the living room, he said, "Mom, I want to take you somewhere peaceful, maybe by the sea, just the two of us." I smiled faintly. "That sounds nice, David, but peace doesn't come from the sea. It comes from within." He looked at me, confused, but I didn't explain further. How could I? Peace was something I had found the day I stopped begging for love that wasn't given freely. That night, I wrote in my old diary, the same one I had kept since my wedding day so many decades ago. I wrote, "They broke my body, but not my spirit. They silenced my voice, but I found it again. I am not just a mother, not just a widow, not just a burden. I am Margaret Hale, and my story will not be forgotten." The next morning, I returned to the park, the same bench where I had once wept, the same spot where that kind stranger had told me I was stronger than I knew. I sat there, watching the pigeons, feeling the sun warm my face. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free from Emily, free from silence, free from the chains of being unseen. David would walk his own path now. Whether he truly changed or not was his burden to carry. As for me, I had carried enough. And so, my story ends not with despair, but with strength, not with weakness, but with resolve. Because sometimes the greatest victory is not in winning others back, but in finding yourself again. And if anyone out there hears my story, let it be a reminder, no matter how much pain life gives you, no matter how forgotten you feel, your worth is never decided by those who fail to see it. I am Margaret Hale. I am a mother. I am a survivor, and my truth will live on.